His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie left huge political, cultural, and modern legacies worldwide. He also left behind buildings closely associated with his life and history, but also containing new meanings. We propose an international network of Haile Selassie's former sites of residence, which would aim to create bonds and share local knowledge among diverse colleagues. Collaborating remotely, we're aspiring to protect, care for, discuss, and share this built legacy, as well as intangible elements, from various regions in Ethiopia, the city of Bath, Massawa, and Jerusalem for start, all exploring together new ways of documenting, sharing skills, and expanding the understanding of modern heritage in Ethiopia and broadly.
Jerusalem is still the haven wherein the Emperor of Abyssinia is resting after his disastrous last days in the last Black Empire. Still a figure of dignity, Haile Selassie is spending his time in contemplation and prayer with his family, while travelers from Addis Ababa report that the capital is still a city of despair. Many are the arrests and executions that fall to the lot of those left in Ethiopia.
Yes, I am now in my office, actually sitting in the, which was actually the bedroom of the Prince Sassfausen. And I am in the first floor of the institute actually, the first floor. So I can explain what the first floor is all about during Imperial Haile Selassie and the current one. This first floor, I can give you the general picture, was generally used for residence of the emperor, which consists of the emperor's and empress bedrooms, other family members' bedrooms. You know, you can find children's room, bedroom, dining room, painting and reception rooms, and emperor's private library is just we found here in the first floor. Here, now what attracts visitors' attention are the bedroom of the Emperor Haile Selassie, just on the left side, and the bedroom of Emperor's Menen on the right side. In the Emperor's bedroom, several private items of the Emperor are now available and displayed for visitors. Of these items, for example, his phone, his private phone, writing table, a small statue of the Lion of Judah, the crown bed, dressing table, several gifts from given from heads of states of different parts of the world. And we can find also locker with its several types of shoes and clothes of the emperor. So, and the empress bedroom on the right side is somehow empty and has only her photographs, several 4 or 5 photographs, bigger one, chairs, and the official clothes called, we call it kaba. Okay, and then if you see like the view of the emperor's bedroom is just you can able to look at or visit about 800 to 1 kilometer, the first gate. So you can visit everything, the garden, while the empresses are just behind the emperor. So the view is very, as you know, the emperor, likes to enjoy the air, to think, to take rest with, on the view of the garden. So we have in the university compound, we have a big garden. Just when you come in, using the first gate, the bigger one, the main gate. So we call it the main gate, and you can look at the main gate while you are in the bedroom of the emperor. So you can visit, look at everything around. So this is what fascinates, the bedroom of the emperor, in addition to the materials it holds now.
How is it different in the Fairfield House? How His Majesty's bedroom looks like?
Okay, His Majesty's bedroom, because we have two floors and a basement at Fairfield House. So upstairs we have, on the first floor, His Majesty's room, and probably not as grand or as big, as we would see a palace would be. And when we came in, there was nothing in Fairfield House, so we have nothing to showcase, except there was one photograph that was downstairs. But we were informed, as we've just heard, that the emperor had his own room, the empress had her room, and next to that room was an indoor chapel. So we've still kept that as a room where people can go to, and it's dressed by the Ethiopian families. And upstairs as well were family rooms for the children, or the nursery as they called it. Downstairs we have, where we're sitting right now, we have the reception room, the conservatory, the dining room, and there would be offices and a telephone room in the house as well. So we are just on that simple scale of knowing what it looks like. Again, thanks to Ras Benji, we were able to see some pictures of how it was dressed, but there was no furniture for us to find or to replace it with.
But we do have, don't we? One.
Oh, we have. But we're saving that one.
No, that's now.
No, it's a great one.
So. Can we tell everyone about that, Keren?
Of course.
Okay.
I will let you tell it.
Okay, so we have beautifully restored, thanks to the work of Dr. Sean Sobers, His Majesty's pianola, manufactured by W. Menzel, so proper German instrument. And it's also come back to the house with dozens of pianola rolls. So this is like a mechanical piano which can play tunes mechanically from punched hole paper cylinders. And we have some of the cylinders. We've had the pianola restored, and very soon we will be able to listen to the music that the imperial family listened to of an evening during the 1930s.
Which also actually attracted the international attention in 1937, is our balcony. The Gannatalul balcony is one of the fascinating, part of the palace, and highly related with the event of occupation of the country by the Italians. So after the Italian occupation of Addis Ababa on the 5th of May of 1936, several things were happened in the country, and the Italian Viceroy Graziani moved his soldiers from his legation, previous legation of Italian legation, to Gannatalul Palace to occupy, to make this palace as his administrative office. Okay, and he transferred everything from his residence to his residence to the palace, and they used to address a speech to the mass in the palace, to the crowd by the standing on the balcony in most cases. So the palace attracted actually international attention on the 9th of February 1937, actually, which was broadcasted by European medias, if you like. In 1937, February 1937, was a very good event on this balcony when the Italian Viceroy Graziani held a celebration on the commemorate of the birth of Prince of Naples. Among the celebrations was offering a speech on this day to the mass while standing on the front balcony of the palace. During the midday of this day, while Graziani was giving a speech, two Ethiopians of the time, Abraha Deboch and Mogas Askudum, thrown bread out hand bombs on the officials, where several Italians and Graziani himself were seriously wounded and others killed. This was actually followed by a revenge by the Italian troops who killed thousands of Ethiopians, men, women, and children. So there are visitors often ask, the institute to visit this balcony because they know it attracted in February 1937, attracted international attention. Particularly the Italian visitors would like to look at this balcony. So this is the most important, the fascinating one to visit while you were in the Gannatalul Palace today.
Is it open to the public?
Yes, it's open actually. It was, it used to serve as a library, library. But
the balcony itself.
Yes, not the balcony. You go through the balconies from through the library because during the emperor's time it was a reception room. It's a big reception room to the next hall. So you go through. If you want to go to the balcony, you have to go through this big hall. So it was a big hall was used to serve as a library reading room.
And
now
today
the library left. Yeah, the library left to another new building, and so now it's open. It's open to visitors.
But today the palace is also working as a semi-library.
No, the library now left for another building, new building. So now the palace is simply serving as a museum.
But also the Institute of Ethiopian Studies.
Exactly. This is part of the Institute of Ethiopian Studies. And the offices, actually, our office, where I am now.
So we have a link on balconies, don't we? And we also have a link on the Institute of Ethiopian Studies.
That's right.
Should we tell Dr. Takele? We have two balconies we want to tell you about. Want to go?
Yeah. We have a small balcony just outside where we're sitting right now with a big magnolia tree. We would imagine this magic would have been standing there and looking over, because we were told also that from Fairfield House, when in his bedroom and he's looking, it reminded him of home, of a heart. So we would imagine standing there on that balcony as well, probably watching the children, watching people come in around his garden, because we've got a large garden ourselves. There's also another balcony above that, but that was to a bedroom, again, not knowing how that would have opened up, but that is a special space as well. And then...
Well, our balconies, they're a bit more peaceful than your balconies. We haven't had the same dramas that you've had. The worst invasion on our balcony was, it got invaded by a magnolia tree, and we don't really know what to do about that. But the other balcony we have is, so he would have a routine of walking from here to the center of Bath, which is, it's a proper walk, a good 20, 25 minutes. And there's an independent cinema there, the little theater. And His Imperial Majesty would sit in the balcony of this theater, and he would watch the newsreels which describe the progress of the Second World War. And this day, if you go there, there's a photograph of him and a plaque, and you can sit. It's a beautiful cinema. It's a lovely place to sit and watch your favorite independent films. And you feel you're sitting where he would have watched this very important material.
Yes, and he would have been hearing what was happening in Ethiopia. So although he, the sadness would be for him to be here and not to be there, but knowing what was going on there as well. Yeah. So when we think of the little theater, we think of that time, we think of that sadness as well, that His Majesty would have gone through.
This piece is following on from the virtual event that took place as part of the Freedom in the City Festival in Bath. The event was done in collaboration with the Fairfield House Bath Community Interest Company, the Institute of Ethiopian Studies, and Heritage Watch Association Ethiopia. Here, we showcased excerpts from the conversation that stretched between Dr. Takele Merid Efase, situated in Genatelul Palace, Addis Ababa, built by the Emperor in 1930. Pauline Swaby-Wallace and William Heath, in Fairfield House, Bath, the royal family's house during their time in exile, from 1936. Princess Esther Selassie Antohin, great-granddaughter of Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie, resident at the time in the US, and Keren Kuenberg, streaming from Jerusalem.
Hello, I'm Chandler McCoy, Senior Project Specialist at the Getty Conservation Institute. I'm here today to talk about the recent workshop done as a partnership between the GCI and the Africa World Heritage Fund as part of the Modern Heritage of Africa initiative. This workshop took place on the 14th and the 21st of July of this year. The objectives of this workshop were to introduce representatives from the MoHoA group to the GCI's 20th Century Historic Thematic Framework, to get reactions and feedback from the participants about how it relates to or can be used within the African context, and finally to demonstrate, using places selected by the participants, how the framework can be applied to modern works in Africa. It was originally published in early 2021. The thematic framework is a tool to assist in identifying and contextualizing 20th century heritage places. It's intended to promote broad thinking about the historical processes that shaped the 20th century. It identifies the principal social, technological, political, and economic phenomena that shaped the built environment. It covers a variety of heritage typologies, including buildings, cities, industrial heritage, and landscapes. It was a joint project between the Getty Conservation Institute and the ICOMOS 20th Century International Scientific Committee, which is known as the ISC20C. The catalyst for the work was the lack of recognition and protection for the 20th century heritage and the need to contextualize it when making decisions about listing. ISC20C was especially interested in helping the World Heritage Center identify a more diverse array of 20th century sites and to foster comparative analysis of these sites. We wanted to look beyond the great 20th century architects and styles that currently dominate the World Heritage List and look more holistically at the full range of significant 20th century heritage places in order to identify them before they are at risk. We wanted to produce a framework that could be used globally and adapted to local or national contexts. So what is a thematic framework? Let's start by looking at how heritage is usually identified in a region. Typically, we find three standard approaches are taken to assessments or surveys. The first approach is chronological, in which timeframes are established and places are evaluated according to when they were constructed. The second is the architectural approach, which begins with an understanding of the architectural styles of a region and selecting those places that exemplify or illustrate that particular style. This approach leads to favoring the buildings designed by famous architects and already acknowledged architectural styles and movements. Last, there is the thematic approach, which we feel offers a broader and more diverse approach that can also be more egalitarian in its outcome. It identifies themes that represent the region in a time frame being studied. Once there is agreement about themes, it's relatively easy to find places that exemplify them. Themes can be represented by a wide range of buildings, infrastructure, and landscapes. We considered a vast array of possible themes and topics and distilled them into 10 interconnected historic themes that relate to 20th century heritage places. These themes identify the principal social, technical, political, and economic drivers. They also identified sub-themes that further articulate each theme. Each of the 10 themes is accompanied by an essay that helps to illustrate what it is supposed to mean. Each of the 10 overarching themes is broken into a number of related sub-themes that link the themes to types of places and finally to individual places. We identified a wide range of types of places that exemplify each theme. This example from theme 6, internationalization, shows the sub-themes and the types of places that relate to it. So after we presented these slides that gave a brief introduction to the thematic framework, we had a plenary discussion on the first day where we got reactions and comments from the participants. I've listed here some of the reactions and comments that we got. First thing we heard was that there was this idea that the language and descriptors used were too Eurocentric. Also, there was concern about the theme rapid urbanization because it was felt it didn't take into account rural development and the continuation of traditional patterns of living that persisted alongside the growth of big cities. We found out that liberation history was felt to be one of the most important themes in Africa. One of the participants felt that the examples given by GCI were all expatriate activities taking place in Africa, which was more aligned with the Dokomomo idiom that focuses on commerce, industrialization, and so on. One of the participants said that the notion of exogeneity must be considered. We must look at the foreign architects or people who came from elsewhere who created buildings in Africa. One participant thought that if MoHoA was throwing away Western ideas about modernity or modernism, they have to look beyond the time period of the 20th century. Modernity has to be defined differently for the African context. And one participant said that in North Africa, there was really no difference between the 19th and the 20th century. We also heard the need to consider everyday modernity and look at architecture that was not designed by an architect and look at vernacular places. It was noted that the thematic framework did not seem to have a place for local architecture built using traditional building practices. There was a question about how could the framework be applied to domestic buildings, many of which were not designed by architects. Again, someone asked about how does everyday modernity, which uses traditional buildings, fit into this framework? Finally, in the discussion of modern Africa, we need to look at alternative themes and additional themes and the cross-cutting nature of the themes to understand what is present in Africa. We started day 2 by recapping our previous presentation, reminding the participants that the 10 themes also contain sub-themes that help to explain and expand their meaning. It's important to look at the themes and the sub-themes together. This diagram was created in order to try to explain how the thematic framework approach could be used to move towards an Africa modern heritage list because the thematic framework is a way to sort and categorize information, and inherently it compares places of the same type. It is a way to contextualize places and also to make comparative analysis between places. Finally, it can be used to help determine the values that relate to significance. This method can be used in creating local, regional, and national heritage inventories. However, if you're looking to put buildings on a national or on an African modern heritage tentative list, you also have to consider establishing their outstanding universal value. When you're doing this activity, it's very important to do a comparative analysis, and we feel the thematic framework can be very useful in this regard. We also reminded the participants that the GCI framework can be taken and modified as necessary to make it work in Africa. The issues that were raised on the first day lead us to believe that modification is necessary. It's possible that theme titles must be changed and that the way we define the sub-themes also need to be changed. Possibly new themes need to be added. At the end of day 2, we engaged in an interactive exercise where we asked the participants to send in photos of places they knew, and together we discussed which themes might apply to them. Throughout the exercise, the places we discussed illustrated the ways in which the thematic framework worked and the ways in which it needed to be revised. Alyssa Berry presented information about the Great Mosque of Porto Novo in Benin. From the end of the 18th century, Porto Novo was an arrival point for the former slaves from Brazil who had returned to Africa. When they returned, most became craftsmen applying building techniques learned in Brazil. This mosque is an example of this Afro-Brazilian building type. It is still used today, although it is in very poor condition. So the discussion was about which themes applied. It was felt that this fits into theme 4, although not exactly how we currently define it. It's directly linked to the slave trade, which was one of the first world trades. It's also linked to theme 6, internationalization, but it relates to this theme in a different way as well. But it does fit here because we speak about these former slaves coming back to Africa and the notion of human rights and international relations. Of course, it also relates to theme 9 because it is a religious structure. It was noted it might also relate to theme 1 on urbanization because one of the sub-themes here relates to the migration to cities. The second example was submitted by Reem, and what's pictured here are 4 hotels from southern Algeria. These were all designed by the architect Fernand Pouillon, who moved to Algeria in 1965, and he created over 37 hotels in Algeria. These 4 examples of hotels are built in areas that are relatively unknown. They are based on traditional architectural expression, and this resulted in the export of this expression to the north. These 4 examples emphasize traditional architecture and traditional forms found in the regions they are located in, such as the dome and the minaret. However, these are constructed using modern materials like reinforced concrete. So in this case, it was felt that the theme rapid urbanization, the growth of cities, was an appropriate theme. Theme 6, internationalization, was also appropriate because it represents the south to north transfer of influence, meaning this local architecture has been internationalized. We also talked about how it might represent theme 8, popular culture and tourism. Certainly these hotels were catering to the tourist trade in Algeria. And finally, theme 2, accelerated scientific and technological development, applies because of the use of modern building materials to replace the traditional building methods in this case. This project presented by Mark Olwini is the ancestral home of the current Tiang Adhola in eastern Uganda. This house demonstrates the transition of technology during the pre-war years. Originally built with a thatched roof, it was changed to a steel roof. It was also the first house in the district to be connected to electricity. It became the center of a number of key educational and development activities and has been kept alive because of the passion of the Tian Adhola Association for this particular building. So it was thought that it could sit under theme 9, cultural institutions, but the participants felt it doesn't fit as written because this only encompasses the 20th century. It was felt that theme 2, accelerated scientific and technological development, might also apply, which includes the technological advancements in building materials that I discussed, such as the electrification of the building and the use of modern materials like corrugated steel. The theme rapid urbanization does not work in Africa as it is currently written, but this house is a good example of how rural settlements persisted and changed in modern times. As written, the theme doesn't capture the fact that there is a lot of development in rural areas and that people have stayed in these areas and not moved to big cities. The last example I'm going to show was presented by Ishan Losen, who talked about the old town of Kanu, which is over 500 years old. Its development has been influenced by the role of Islam and the Fulani people of West Africa, and later by colonization. There was traditional industry from the production of textiles, which has lasted to the present day. We also see in the historic center of Kanu the remnants of the slave markets. Starting with the trans-Saharan period, Kanu has also had global trade. It remains today a commercial city that is heavily involved in formal trade networks in West Africa. Politically, the historic center is marked by the palace of the Emir of Kanu. The palace of Kanu has survived every possible political change in modern day Nigeria, but we see that the traditional institution of leadership continues for today. So the themes that were picked were these. First, theme 7, conserving the natural environment, buildings, and landscape. This was picked because Kanu is a historic urban landscape and it has many layers. Theme 9 was picked, religious, educational, and cultural institutions, because of the presence of Islamic schools and knowledge, and also Christian schools that were set up under the colonial government. The palace itself is also a cultural institute. And finally, theme 4, world trade and global corporations. This seems to fit well here. It reflected in the trans-Saharan trade and movement into current times. So I've presented just 4 examples of these places that were presented and discussed. We feel that this discussion was very helpful in seeing how the thematic framework can be used for African examples, and pointed out some specific ways that these themes did not work in Africa as currently written. It also demonstrated that most places can be categorized using more than one theme. We ended the workshop with the hope that those developing the African Modern Heritage Survey would consider using this framework and, through revision and modification, make it into a tool to help in the difficult task of identifying places and determining their significance. Thank you.